Do you know what? I'm just gonna say it. I'm gonna say it. This is the best weapon meta we've had in Destiny 2's history. If I sound like a bit of a broken record, that's because it's not the first time I've come to or hinted at that conclusion. The balancing that's been happening from the weapons team at Bungie since Beyond Light has not gone unnoticed, and we're approaching a sort of end game with the weapon meta. But with the overabundance of choice, with so many different archetypes of weapons seemingly viable, it can be difficult for people to decide what to run, myself included. So I did what every normal person does, and sat down with many cups of tea to rank every single weapon archetype in PvP for Destiny 2. Like I said, totally normal. I took into account time to kill, optimal ranges, how they play in practice, and what sort of competition they have within their intended situations. And on the whole, I found that it's really not as simple as rating something S tier or dismissing it entirely. Once you scrape past the surface, the balancing is so nuanced, and the way Destiny 2 plays is so intricate that categorizing everything in hard boxes seems like a disservice to the game that we have in front of us. It is possible to find success with all the weapon archetypes listed here, even the bad ones, if you can work within their limitations. So keep that in mind as we go through what has become a staple video for this channel in the last year. My name is Ascendant Nomad, and welcome to the state of the meta for Season of the Lost. With PvP undergoing a radical shift in sentiment after the success of the Trials revamp, it's time to sort the facts from the fiction. As with the previous State of the Meta videos, we're going to be taking a broader view of everything and discussing archetypes as a whole rather than fixate on individual weapons. The reason for this approach is that every archetype has its one or two special cases, so instead we're going to be looking at everything from a macro, bottom-up approach. Also, for my own sanity, I'm leaving the thorough examination of exotics for another video. They're meant to be exceptional and meta-breaking by design, so I'll do that another time. Leave a comment below if that's something you'd like to see. I've organized the archetypes into loose categories, but I'm not giving anything any ratings or definitive tiers. But some things are worse than others, and I can't shy away from that. So, let's start with the stuff to avoid. The bad. This should be rather self-explanatory. These archetypes of weapons currently don't have a good place in the sandbox. Whether it's because of map design or because their sibling archetypes are more effective, the general consensus is to avoid these frames when you're considering building a meta loadout. It should be no surprise that the high impact and precision auto rifles are the first archetypes that come to mind. These are your 360 RPM and 450 RPM auto rifles respectively, and they've got no place in the current sandbox. 360s shine when they have a little bit of space and time to breathe, which most maps in Destiny 2 don't really allow. And on the off chance that you do find yourself out in the open with some distance, you better pray that the other person doesn't have a half decently rolled anything? At a 0.93 second time to kill, or TTK, that's a long time to be constantly on target in this sandbox. 450s, on the other hand, have a 0.8 second TTK in comparison, but they offer no discernible advantage to their 600 RPM siblings. Their engagement ranges overlap, and the idea for 450s is to use them safely at range, but you have to be constantly on target. And at the ranges it's supposed to work at, I can't really recommend this over other mid to long range duelers, especially ones that work better with cover, like pulse rifles. Next on the list are lightweight bows, and why do these exist? Like, does anybody have a real answer for Look, whilst they sport superior draw time and have the added bonus of extra mobility, they can't one-shot, which I know no bows can, but their base damage profile is lower than the precision frame siblings, doing 138 crit and 86 body versus 151 crit and 101 body respectively, meaning they can't be used as reliably in cleanup or third-party situations. 150 RPM scout rifles at least have a fairly competitive time to kill in 0.8 seconds, and they can be used in a peak shot situation, from cover, from distance. But they're zoom monsters that don't suit most maps. They do have a future in Destiny 2, I believe that, but right now, they're not suited to Destiny 2 PvP. 180 RPM scout rifles. On the special side, rapid-fire shotguns were already the butt of all barrel jokes, and the shotgun nerf made them even worse. They're a strictly PvE archetype that experiences damage falloff at 5 meters in the Crucible. And whilst the extra RPM is nice for a quick follow-up, that pitiful range makes them a painfully inconsistent experience. The last frame to avoid here are the rapid fire sniper frames, or 140 RPM snipers. It's not that they're bad per se, it's just that the other sniper frames can kind of do everything else they can do, just better. They require 3 body shots to kill, 1 to the head as usual, but the issue is their lower base range and lower base zoom across the board, which just doesn't feel sticky enough compared to the alternatives. Now, some people may prefer the lower zoom because that's what we've kind of all become accustomed to over the last 3 years. High zoom snipers only really started coming in with Beyond Light, as a direct result of the feedback about snipers starting to feel a little too oppressive in the Crucible. But with the relationship between range and zoom changing how aim assist behaves on the field, the lower values for both stats mean that they're harder to use well than their sibling archetypes. Now, for the next step up, the OK. These archetypes can certainly do some work, but a playstyle must be developed to achieve consistent results, and builds will help mask some of their deficiencies. Precision bows have developed a bit of a cult following over the last year or so, with the resilient few silently triggering their opponents into oblivion. 151 crit damage is nothing to sniff at, which can be boosted by perks like Swashbuckler and Biting Winds, high energy fire charged with light builds, and empowering riffs. It's been the scary pairing to use with Ariana's Vow for quite some time now, and for those in the know, a precision bow is the way to go. But it remains a bow, and this cult following have understood that trying to play normally is a bit of a shit show. To achieve a good level of flow, you must learn to play around its draw time and lack of situational versatility. That's not a low blow, that's just the way it goes. Adaptive pulse rifles like the Forger's Pledge and Last Perdition also get put into the OK category. I'm sure you all saw my video where I decided to do nasty things with it, but these archetypes are heavily role and playstyle dependent. They're very forgiving weapons to use and their feel is perfect for new players to the Crucible, but they're never great and they'll never worry a good player with their 0.93 time to kill. In a similar note, shout out to the 3 non-sunset 450 RPM pulse rifles still kicking about, but very much forgotten about from the weapons team. This archetype was never great and looks to be on its way out. Do you know which ones they are? First comment that gets it correct gets a box of Jaffa Cakes. 180 RPM hand cannons. What a strangely enigmatic archetype. I think all of us have never quite gotten over Not Forgotten. Hey, Not Forgotten, I get it. Big brain bunch. So with every weapon we get in this archetype, we seek to replicate the Not Forgotten experience. And you know what? Posterity, Survivor's Epitaph, and the new Vulpecula hand cannon can all kind of do it with their perk pools in certain situations. Otherwise, they're consistent experiences for all, especially on console, where the precision frame negates accuracy penalties and keeps recoil very under control. But their body and crit damage of 39 and 58 respectively is very low, which makes them hard to recommend from a dueling perspective. Now before we proceed, if you're enjoying this video so far, be sure to leave a like down below. It really helps this video and channel get noticed. Thank you. Adaptive and precision sidearms are also just okay. They're not special in any way. Their TTKs are competitive enough at 0.6 seconds and 0.7 seconds respectively, but they're very unforgiving. Adaptives require you to hit every crit to achieve that TTK. And whilst precisions are more forgiving, they're also pretty slow to begin with at 257 RPM. So if you don't hit a minimum of 3 crits, you may as well stand still and emote. Adaptives are better than precisions for dueling, but precisions have better base damage. Neither are what I'd look to for a sidearm for Rumble. And as much as it pains me to say it, rapid fire scout rifles are just okay. These were my favorites for a while, but their 0.93 time to kill is not in their favor, as well as the fact that there's still distance options in a world where most maps and engagements are close to mid-range. They're assist magnets like you wouldn't believe, but good luck topping the leaderboard with these. Finally, high impact fusions lost 2 bolts and gained more charge time, but their damage per bolt has been increased and the recoil per burst has been significantly reduced. The new Iota Draconis feels like a railgun more than anything else, and it's awesome, but that high charge time comes with some huge playstyle adjustments, and I'm not gonna lie, a 1 second charge time feels like forever in PvP. and it just doesn't seem worth running when other frames are just as capable more quickly. This archetype, flat out, does not feel good, but it kills reliably when it works. Now, this is where the fun begins. The good. These archetypes are here to make things interesting, without really having you worry about them all too much. Let's start with lightweight scout rifles, or 200 RPM scouts, which are pretty good, all things told. Eternal Blazon and Nightwatch are the class leaders, with the Blazon in particular able to roll rapid hit and kill clip for some nasty 3-tap action at range. Mida Multitool remains the best scout in the game by some distance for PvP, solely for the mobility boosts and the generous aim assist. Maps don't favor scouts as we've just said, but if you're hankering for one, you'll find that the 200 RPM scout archetype is handedly the best suited for the Crucible. Aggressive burst and lightweight sidearms also make the cut for the good category. Both have the same precision damage profile with 45 crit, but differ on body shot damage, with aggressives doing 33 and lightweights doing 31. Despite that, both require just 3 crits and 2 body to kill, making them quite forgiving. Lightweights do cannibalize aggressive since they have a faster rate of fire, but aggressive bursts just feel a lot better. Both are deadly killers in the right hands. These sidearms have a bit of competition, namely the 750 RPM aggressive SMGs, and they're intended for closer targets. They have the joint fastest time to kill of all the SMGs at 0.67 seconds, but the proviso is that you have to land all 8 bullets to the head. And I don't know about you, but most people can't do that with any sort of regularity. They have less base range than their precision counterparts and no mobility benefits from their lightweight cousins. Yet, despite their unforgiving nature and their less than desirable stat packages, they remain lethal killers and deserve their place in this category. 600 RPM auto rifles. These are the most well-rounded autos in the game right now. They're great for aggressive players and more measured players alike, dealing good damage at a high RPM with great baseline stats that make for a very forgiving overall package, and a 0.8 second time to kill to boot. To use them well, you do have to spend a lot of time out in the open, which makes them relatively easy to counter against disciplined players that place behind cover. This issue also extends to 600 RPM precision submachine guns, though it's less of an issue when you consider that these weapons occupy much closer engagement ranges and favor direct combat playstyles. For their intended operating ranges, you're going to be going up against a lot of different options, almost all of them being of the special ammo variety. But they still shred in the right place at the right time, especially with damage perks like kill clip. Now here's our first controversial pick, aggressive frame shotguns like Felwinter's Lie and Astral Horizon. Like I said, certain weapons can stand above the archetype's baseline, and Felwinter's certainly straddles a line between good and great. So too does the Prophecy shotgun A Sudden Death, if you can get the elusive threat detector and elemental capacitor roll, but the archetype as a whole is just kind of there? They've got, as near as makes no difference, the same range as lightweight shotguns now, with far less handling, worse perk pools, and a larger cone angle spread. They feel heavy and cumbersome to use, which is not a nice feeling to have in a rapid-paced environment like the Crucible. Handling perks are almost mandatory if they're available. The higher base damage counteracts these negatives a great deal. It is very hard to overlook their damage output, as it is the one constant in the sea of RNG that is shotgunning. But despite this, I find myself turning to Reese Walker or Retrofuturist for their mobility boost and better perk packages for a more dynamic experience. Shotgunners have to accept that their shots may not kill, and when that happens, I find myself wanting a faster fire rate or the ability to switch to a primary for the cleanup. Both of those options are harder to pull off with aggressives. In a similar vein, I'm not supremely sold on precision frame pellet shotguns either, which are only a little above aggressive simply because they're not subject to the same handling penalties across the board. Overall, the weapons in this frame sport very nice stat packages and come with interesting roll combinations to make the shotgunning experience full of variety, but their lethality is not much better than lightweights and they have no mobility bonuses. For these reasons, they're good, but not great. Trace rifles make their way into the good category for me because they're quite niche and a little strangely placed in the overall sandbox. There's a ton of other options that work in their intended ranges, and you'd bank on those options to do a more reliable job. But calling trace rifles bad isn't even close to being accurate either. In many ways, the cult of trace rifles that's been developing over the last few months isn't unwarranted. They're very effective and sport a relatively fast TTK, but you need to be precise to get the best out of them. They're a really solid anti-shotgun option as well, with Agha's Scepter in particular being a pleasant surprise for me in the Crucible. And finally, grenade launchers. The changes to splash damage was very welcome in the patch notes, but where they were really hit was the mod economy costs. The Scavenger costs 5 energy. The Loader and Dexterity mods both cost 4 energy. They're functionally still good options for those who want to master it, but they're not easy to build with, and they're not as easy to get a kill with. Fusions have taken the place of GLs in the artifact, meaning those who want to run GLs will need to be really dedicated to making a build to do so. Now, shall we get to the really good stuff? The great archetypes in Destiny 2 are all meta contenders. They should all be thought of highly, and they should 100% factor into your plans for making your latest builds and perfecting your playstyles. And it should be no surprise that in this sandbox, there's quite a few incredibly good options for you to choose from. Let's start with, well, I'd say it's a surprise, but it's really not the more you think of it. 120 RPM hand cannons. Yeah, they're still great. They offer a high amount of damage from a high amount of range. If you're new to hand cannons, this is actually a pretty great archetype to start with. High range means high aim assist, so it's harder to miss than to land your shots. Stay back and stay in cover, because if you are caught out in the open, you are really going to feel the effects of that 1 second time to kill pretty quickly. These are not dueling weapons as such, they're not 140s, they're for hanging back and team shooting, for learning the ropes of playing cover and watching your positioning with respect to the action. Even though they no longer 2-tap, they are still very viable options for players of all skill levels. Getting used to the recoil will take time, but it will be worth it. On the other end of the range scale, are you aware that 720 RPM auto rifles absolutely shred right now? They have a base time to kill of 0.77 seconds, which admittedly isn't all that much faster from 600 RPM's time to kill of 0.8 seconds, but provided you can handle the recoil of your chosen 720, you're going to find a very competitive medium close dueler. They're meant to be used aggressively and with extreme prejudice. Bear down on your enemies and take them out. They compete directly with SMGs, sidearms, shotguns, and fusions, but with the comfort of being able to take them all on at an extended range that rivals 140 RPM hand cannons. They're not for everyone, and someone who doesn't use this archetype aggressively or, hell, proactively, will end up on the short end of a lot of fights. So run with intent, and this might just be the archetype for you. Speaking of being proactive, the Suros rapid-fire sidearms are also incredibly handy in the right situations. 450 RPM, full auto intrinsic, and a 0.67 time to kill that only requires 5 out of your 6 bullets to be crits. They're not a freebie by any means, but they're effective against onrushing targets like shotgun apes. Full auto helps take some of the work out of the equation, and the fire rate allows you ample time to make corrections to your bursts. Though since this is a very close range archetype, you don't want to be attempting to map anyone as the range is its main downside. Otherwise, a fantastic short range dueler that works really well in double primary or aggressive special ammo playstyles. Now, for some special options. Lightweight shotguns are the current kings of the pellet shotguns. They're the mandatory pick for anyone getting started with shotgunning, as they will help you dial in your movement, initial positioning, and technique. The low range that all shotguns have now is made greatly more bearable by that mobility boost, allowing you to get a little bit closer and a little bit faster, making your killing experience just that little bit more consistent. This archetype encourages you to move. And with the great perk packages, competitive overall stats, and general fun factor that just comes with zipping from target to target, they're in the great category with good reason. Precision and adaptive fusion rifles are the least changed of the fusion rifle archetypes, but they got a bit of a damage buff nonetheless with the fusion rifle rework. Both archetypes require 5 out of their 7 bolts to kill, and precisions have the better overall stat packages that are relevant to fusion players, with greater range and stability across the board. Adaptives trade this statistical inferiority for a faster charge time in return, and you know what? It kinda hurts them. The charge time differential results in a slightly weaker damage profile that makes them feel rather inconsistent. It could be that I had a badly rolled trinary system and Techian Force, but they didn't feel as sticky as I'd like them to. They're still fantastic killers, and no doubt with the right roll they'd be even better for me, but it's hard to recommend them over Precisions, which are range monsters and occupy that sweet spot right now in terms of engagement ranges for fusion rifle mains. Precisions have better range, stability, and damage than Adaptives. Both are very roll dependent to work well, but I'd give the edge to Precisions simply for that range. The things you can do with the right one are borderline illegal. Finally, 90 RPM sniper rifles continue to be a solid all-around pick. They just feel right. Snipers will always have a place in the upper echelons of the Destiny meta until they become prohibitively harder to use, and right now, for the power they offer, they're in a really good spot. It absolutely sucks to be flinched when ADS'd with this archetype, as the range to zoom to aim assist relationship isn't quite as good as it used to be, meaning it's very hard to snipe through oncoming fire. You really have to pick your moments with the 90, but that's what all good snipers do anyways. The Adept Uzume RR4 is by far the best sniper of its class, and the Snapshot Vorpal roll is something you should chase when you have the opportunity. Slap on Adept Range or Adept Icarus, and it feels as oppressive as Beloved did in its heyday. And that's it. Every weapon archetype ranked. Every single one. No, I didn't miss any. Unless you're referring to the Hallowed archetypes. You know, the ones we don't talk about because we don't want them nerfed. Or maybe we do want them nerfed. How else would we function as a community if we didn't have something to complain about? Surely you're not interested in the weapons that challenge the laws of space magic physics as we know it? Well, okay then. But be warned, once you've seen this, you can't go back. The final category consists of the options that, without a shadow of a doubt, you should invest your time into mastering. Some options here have been an ever-present for multiple seasons. Others are new additions to the top rung of the ladder. We have 7 archetypes to discuss, and I have dubbed them the Elite 7. Our first member of the Elite 7 is the ever-present 140 RPM hand cannon. It should come as no surprise, as this archetype has practically set up their life in the upper levels. As long as Destiny 2 plays the way that it does, 140 RPM hand cannons will be the #1 option for Destiny 2 PvP. And I can already hear the complaints in the comments section below before they're written. And I get it. Trust me, I do. But it's time to accept that your emotions are temporary, but Ace of Spades is forever. 140 statistically seem unremarkable compared to other primary options that kill faster than its 0.87 seconds, but it is this statistical balance and situational versatility that allow this archetype to shine brightly in nearly every single primary duel you'll face in PvP. With 70 crit and 48 body damage, the key to using a 140 well is to pair it with a healthy amount of good movement, good rotation, and an ironclad usage of cover and peak shooting, which is why a lot of people can't use it well. Seeking to play from cover is not a concept that is reinforced well in Destiny 2 outside of endgame content. So when a good player with good positional discipline rolls a lobby because they stay behind cover, it can be easy to blame the gun. In reality, 140s rule for their excellent dueling range, low zoom, aerial versatility, and burst damage from safety, which is handy in tense team shot situations. Almost all of them ship with a gratuitous amount of aim assist, which, admittedly, makes that 3-tap feeling absolutely timeless. Member number 2 of the Elite 7 is the Adaptive Sidearm Archetype, Homilon or Normal. These 3 burst monsters have an optimal time to kill of 0.5 seconds, with a 491 RPM fire rate, 32 crit, 20 to the body. Even though the 0.5 seconds requires perfect accuracy, that's 2 bursts to kill. 2. This is the fastest killing primary in the game right now, and despite the low ranges of these weapons, they kill just fine anyways when used correctly. And even though you need a perfect 2 burst to kill someone, they've got enough damage per bullet that even if you missed a shot, you'll catch them on the 3rd. Very, very scary weapons, all things told. Member number 3 is a niche option, but scarily good when it gets going. 900 RPM lightweight submachine guns. Like their shotgun counterparts, they have the mobility boost to close the gap to make up for their range deficiencies, which can be a very scary prospect to go up against if someone knows how to use it well. With a 0.67 time to kill and only 9 of your 11 bullets required to be crits to get a kill, this archetype is lethal and rather forgiving within range. The proviso being that you absolutely need to hit your shots, otherwise you're going to be up a creek without a paddle. And I won't say they're a skilled weapon or anything like that, because saying something like that opens a huge can of worms. But I will say that your time invested into mastering this archetype will be handsomely rewarded. Member number 4 are the aggressive frame sniper rifles. Super shutdown on command, huge base body shot damage that can be easily manipulated to be a one-shot body kill, a healthy amount of snipers in this archetype too, with a variety of perk pools and experiences. The 72 RPMs have well and truly cemented their place as the best sniper rifle archetypes in the game, in a meta that has leaned very super and ability centric in recent times. Here's a list of stuff in the game that boosts the base damage to 186 or higher, allowing you to get that one-shot body kill. An Empowering Rift, Kill Clip, Rampage X2, Weapons of Light from a Ward of Dawn, Charge with Light and High Energy Fire, Blessing of the Sky buff from a Lumina Noble round, and Adagio if Bungie ever dares roll that on a 72 RPM sniper in the future. Yeah, they're kind of insane. Speaking of insane, member number 5 is the final archetype of the shotgun family, slug shotguns. We all know what duality and chaperone bring to the table, but what's not talked about as much is how lethal those legendary options are as well. No, you won't get crazy 20-meter kills, but you will have 151 damage you can whip out at any time, 258 critical, which is more than handy for a fair number of supers that have some health whittled down, and some very deliberate and interesting perk options across a good number of weapons to help with build crafting. Add in the fact that in 2021, people still greatly underestimate the power of peeking around a corner and or running into a slug user holding back, a deceptive amount of in-air accuracy out the box, and a wonderful capability to be recklessly aggressive, and you're looking at one of the best short-range options in the game. However, the best short-range option, bleeding into mid-range, is by far the new entry to the sandbox. Introducing member number 6, the Rapid Fire Fusion. I don't know who at Bungie made these things eat all the Weetabix in the house, but they sure did. And now they're f***ing terrifying. 9 bolts per shot, 29 damage per bolt, 7 bolts to kill, and a charge time of 0.47 seconds. These things are not okay. I'm very happy they're a thing, and they've turned the short-range meta on its head, and even nearly a month after release, they're still not being talked about or being used as widespread as they ought to be. I imagine a lot of this has to do with the difficulty of obtaining a well-rolled Zealous Reward or Cartesian Coordinate, but if you played a little bit of last season, you have an S-tier option sitting right in your vault. The Null Composure. Equip Heating Up and High Impact Reserves, and just look at it go. If you don't believe me, spend 2 games in PvP with it on. They're the kings of the short range, and they're only just getting started. But every king needs an even better queen, and they make for a great pairing with arguably the queens of primary ammo right now. Elite member number 7, the 340 RPM Pulse Rifle. You know, these things have been meta for well over a year now. Season of Arrivals gave us a taste of what was to come with the introduction of Cold Denial. It wasn't the best stat package, but at the time, that was forgivable due to the 2-burst TTK and really low zoom. Fast forward to today, and we have the Messenger as one of the must-have weapons for every Guardian. And with Trials being supremely accessible now, the ownership percentage of that weapon is about to get a very nice boost indeed. Other 340 RPM offerings may not be as enticing, but you cannot argue against their statistical superiority. 36 critical, 22 base, 0.67 time to kill, 5 crit, 1 body. Range that rivals scout rifles and snipers, more base burst damage in team shot scenarios than 140s or 120s. And we haven't even begun to talk about the possibilities with Desperado, and Kill Clip. It falls down against close range options, but hey, it's a pulse rifle. Whilst there's certainly some outliers in the pool and some oddballs who don't fit the traditional mold, I think we've got a solid ladder here. For the next time we do this, did you like the more nebulous approach of bad, okay, good, great, and insane? Or would you prefer grades like A, B, C, D, E, F, like traditional tier lists? If you made it to the end, thank you so much for watching. I hope you found this video informative and entertaining in equal measure. I'm Ascendant Nomad, and I'm your Crucible Doctor.